All right. Hello, everyone. Here I am in a different room. Had lots of troubles trying to find a place to make a video. Um, because my house is that way. And then I started to get a cough. And I don't know if I'm fighting off something. I hope not. But something started to make me cough. It was almost like someone doesn't want me to make this video. Not you guys, but there's somebody out there who doesn't want me to make this video. That's what I think. Because the minute I started to get ready to do it, everything that could go wrong went wrong, including a possible sickness. So let's hope that I get over this. It's I got a tickle, I got a tickle in my throat and started coughing. I took some allergy medicine. I took a cough drop. So let's just stay calm and carry on. It's Paul's 82nd birthday. And that sounds like a big number, but Paul is young at heart. He'll always be our uh, young Beatle and forevermore. No matter, and Paul throughout every decade, beautiful Paul that we love. And yeah, as much as, and I love John. Obviously, I love John with all my heart in a freakish, weird way. I love him very much. Um, but I also love all the Beatles, and I've always loved Paul. I've been a huge see my bed back here. Um, I've always been a huge Beatles fan and a huge Paul McCartney fan. In fact, I went to his concert, and it's funny, my dog, you know what? That's what I should have put on. Maybe I'll go put it on. Well, whatever. Maybe next time. But I have a bona fide t shirt from the 90s that has stood the test of time in many wearings and washings and pit stains and everything else. And TMI. But that T-shirt, she wore it yesterday. She said she just found it in the closet and she'll randomly put on my stuff, and no context of where I got it or how I got it or whatever. But she's like, "Oh, this looks cool." So she said she wore it yesterday to Target. She went to Target after she went to school. Some things that she's taking at school, and somebody stopped her and said, "That is a cool shirt. Are you a Paul McCartney fan?" And my daughter was like, whatever. It's just took my mom's shirt or whatever. And the lady said, "Well, I love the Beatles so much that I named one of my kids after John Lennon." So I thought that was a really cute story. And the power of the Beatles it's still around. Um, so yeah, I thought that was really cool. And Paul will always be young. I would say that he is so young at heart that I feel like he's even younger than looking and acting than Mick Jagger, who, as we know, is running around on stage still. Here we were talking about ageism and everything with the presidents, but Mick Jagger, Paul McCartney, um, Ringo Starr, they all look so young. So I really think that's to be young at heart, to be young at heart. Huh? And the image on the screen of you with the long hair and glasses makes it look like John is standing next to John. Yeah. I do look like John sometimes, I know. Um, it's fun. Okay, so what was I going to say? What was I going to say? Yeah, well, you know how they have that where they're over the balcony, and I think it's EMI. I think it's the EMI offices, and they're looking over the balcony, and they have the Red album, which is the early hits, right? And then, so they're young, short hair, this type of era. And then they show later, you compare it to the Blue album where they're all over the railing, the same railing, but John's got the long hair, and George has the beard. They all kind of look tired. Yeah, I'm like, it's like that cover. But yeah, Paul McCartney, he has really stayed young looking, young at heart, but he has allowed himself to get some silvers in his hair. And I know for a while that he was dyeing his hair still, and people online were saying, "Oh, I wish Paul would just let his hair go gray." Well, Paul could do whatever he wants to. Like Ringo, he still dyes his hair. And by the way, Kieran is making noises over here. He's itching himself. So if you hear, that's what it is. But anyway, I was saying I was delayed because this was supposed to be half an hour ago. I got well, I lost the room I was going to be in because my son took over that room because technically it's his room. But the thing is, he doesn't usually go in there, but he decided that he's tired because he stayed up all night. So I lose the room that I normally would work in and write in, and then I had to scramble around to find a place where there weren't cats. And like, I don't want to take over my daughter's room. My daughter's room used to be the study. I know this makes me sound selfish, but each room had like a purpose, you know. And during the pandemic, I took over the back room because literally no one was using that room. But it became my son's room. So then I lost that room. I lost the study because my daughter took over that room. And then my room, they're in almost all the time because I have a computer in here. And I have said before, let's get this computer out of here. But it's like from their childhood and their, whatever. So I literally have no uninterrupted space. It's terrible. I sound like a pushover, but it's true. I need to find a space of my own to make videos and just set it up. And I sound pathetic, but also it's the cats. The cats like show up out of nowhere and they'll be all over me, and I love them, but I don't want them all over me when I'm trying to do a video and they knock over stuff. And so anyway, hello, and okay, Paul's birthday. I just wanted to do a celebration because so like this year, Paul had the song Blackbird was redone by Beyonce. And I know there was a lot of controversy over that. And that my point being that here's a man who is 82 now, and but still his music, his words, his message still affecting the world. And I know Paul was often called the cute Beatle. He's the one that did the melodies. John did the words. John was the rocker. Paul was the almost like Rodgers and Hammerstein type of thing. But that's not true. Like, yes, John was very sharp with his words, his lyrics, but Paul has beautiful lyrics too. And Paul could rock out. Paul can sing like Little Richard, and like some of my favorite rock vocals are from Paul. And so the fact that his music is still affecting the world, people are still recording it, it still has a very deep message. I think that's great. That's exciting. So it's great to come on here and just celebrate him as a Beatles fan, but also as a music fan. And going back to the era of listening to Paul, like I have my era of listening to John Lennon, right? And I love all the Beatles. I've listened to all their stuff. But I would say that I had almost as much of a journey listening to Paul's music as John's solo music. And of course, with Paul, there's more because Paul has lived longer. But even things like, I don't know if you remember the album, well, The Flowers in the Dirt, I've talked about that one. That's one of my favorite albums by Paul. It is kind of affected by the 80s. It has a lot of that electronic keyboard sound. But it's great. It's a great album. I love that album. And then you had Hope and Deliverance, right? I should look it up. Let's look at Paul. Chaos and Creation is one of my favorite albums, hands down. I've listened to it over and over and over and over again. So let's look at Paul McCartney's albums. Let's look at this. And a few years ago, somebody said on Facebook, and I know I need to go on Facebook. I haven't done that recently, but they said that Paul should just quit now. He's older. He should quit. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? One of the greatest songwriters in the world, one of the, in rock music and beyond. And you're going to just tell him to stop making music. That's ridiculous. Luckily, Paul did not listen to that person because he's still making music. And I was saying on my social media, which you might have seen, that Paul and Brian Wilson should do either a song, and they could use AI like they did with Now and Then with the Beatles, a song or a complete album. And the thing about Brian Wilson is his wife died, and he's not doing well, but he's still here. And maybe Paul could reach out to him and say, hey, let's get you back up, get you running. Let's write a song together. And then the dream would be, of course, that Ringo plays drums And then David Gilmour come in and play guitar because David Gilmour from Pink Floyd and Paul have been friends for many years, back when Linda was still alive. So, okay, so let's look at this what is it called? Discography? I should know how to say that, but I don't. Discography. That's what you would probably call it. And I still have an itch in my throat. I hope I'm not getting sick, honestly. I don't want to be sick. Okay, is this by year or just by what the heck? We have Ram from 1971, which John, of course, took offense to the album and thought a lot of the messages were about him. Of course, John was writing songs about Paul, and he wrote How Do You Sleep, which is a very cutting song about Paul. What did he say? Something like, you wrote yesterday, but okay, let me look that up. I love How Do You Sleep. I think it's a great song. How Do You Sleep lyrics. Let's see. No, Sam Smith wrote a song called How Do You Sleep. Okay, John Lennon. Okay, not Sam Smith. No offense to him, but Sergeant Pepper took you by surprise. You better see right through that mother's eyes. See, Paul's the one that came up with the Sergeant Pepper thing, like an alternate band that was the Beatles, kind of like in Yellow Submarine, an alternate band that was a band, like a psychedelic. Pepper, I think it's from Pep Pills, and it's just an alias to be themselves, but not. And after John's Jesus comment, and that kind of destroyed what we know as the Beatles, the early Beatles, they kind of had to have something to break the ice and come back into the public eye and be this different, and to express themselves different, to look different, to sound different, to come across in this whole different message, which now they were ready to talk about the war and all of that. But Sergeant Pepper was really Paul. Sergeant Pepper took you by surprise. You better see right through that mother's eyes. The Freaks was right when they said you was dead. Okay, this is John wrote these lyrics. The one mistake you made was in your head. John later says, I was writing it about me. Well, clearly those lyrics are directed at Paul. And he wrote this after he heard Paul's first solo album, Ram. How do you sleep? How do you sleep at night? You live with straights who tell you was king. Jump when your mama tell you anything. The only thing you done was yesterday. That's the lyric I was looking for. And since you've gone, you're just another day. Wow. See, that's, I think that really hurt Paul. He didn't like this. A pretty face may last, I'm laughing, but wow. A pretty face may last a year or two, but pretty soon they'll see what you can do. The sound you make is music to my ears. You must have learned something in all those years. John was really, really mad at Paul for breaking up the band. And even though John had thought about leaving the Beatles, they all had. Look, George is the first one who really did it. So even though he thought about it and kind of had done it with starting the whole Plastic Ono band with Yoko, he was very hurt when Paul broke up the Beatles. And when George left, I guess John felt very depressed about that. So when you watch Get Back and they're all sort of like laughing about it, John actually was very depressed because the Beatles was his legacy. Like he created, to be honest, John and Paul, but John kind of created the Beatles. Well, anyway, this is about Paul. So John wrote How Do You Sleep in response to Paul's Ram album. And how many people, and really it was about their lawyers and Apple and EMI and everything. It was about that divorce. It was like a divorce. So that album, Ram, and then Mccartney with the famous cherries on the white cloth that Linda took. Band on the Run, which is they're all great albums. Okay, that's from 2013. We're skipping years here. Tug of War from 1982, one of my favorite albums because it has the song Wanderlust. I love that song. Pipes of Peace, Flowers in the Dirt, Off the Ground. I loved Off the Ground. I thought the Off the Ground with Hope and Deliverance and Peace in the Neighborhood, those are all great songs. Biker Like an Icon. People don't talk about that Paul McCartney song, but there's this, how Paul would write Eleanor Rigby's like story songs. He wrote a song called Biker Like an Icon, and I loved it. I always wanted to hear him play it live, but I don't think he's ever has. She loved her biker like an icon. Okay, so that's from Off the Ground. And Paul has also done. Yeah, Peace in the Neighborhood is a great song. Press to Play, Chaos and Creation. I love that album. He did a album of rock and roll songs. What's that called? Baka Chop or something. I love that album. Give my regards to Backstreet. Is that what it's called? Let's see. I know I love that movie. Wings at the Speed of Sound. London Town. I love London Town. So anyway, Paul has a huge library of music. Venus and Mars. He has some live albums. Um, he's prolific. Tripping the Live Fantastic. Uh, Mccartney 2 from 1980. Kisses on the Bottom, and he has a new album that just came out, Clapping with One Hand or whatever that is. I need to listen to that. And then his hits. I had one of my favorite albums of Paul is his best hits. So anyway, but I would say hands down, the album I've listened to the most is Chaos and Creation, and who knows why, but I think that's Paul's masterpiece. To be honest, I don't know why. Anyway, Paul McCartney has worked with Michael Jackson, and he worked with Stevie Wonder. He's worked with Taylor Swift. He's worked with Kanye. Um, and his songs have been sung by like Ella Fitzgerald. I think she sung Yesterday. Bob Dylan has stated that Paul McCartney is one of his favorite songwriters, artists, musicians. And so, hey, that's not so bad. So some, right, Jamie? Some guy from Liverpool. It's not so bad. You guys have the magic, uh, whatever portal up there. The drink of the water. Something's in the water in Liverpool. Also, Paul, his career was, not bad, but when 9/11 happened, he was one of the first people, because I guess he was in New York at the time, to offer to do a trip, like a concert, to raise money. And and he walked around with the American flag, and he raised money for the firefighters in New York. So Paul has that magic touch of being able to come back from the dead. Paul is not dead. There's no fall. It's the real Paul. Um, was Paul the walrus? No, I think that Paul, if you look, that's sidetracking all these theories about Paul. But anyway, Paul has a magic touch, don't you think? Let's see. There's the Magical Mystery Tour. If you look behind the costumes and you look at their shirt cuffs, you could tell which one is which. Magical Mystery Tour. Now, who was it? George said in an interview that Paul was the walrus, but he was being kind of cheeky about it, so I'm not sure. I think they kind of all switched out being the walrus, to be honest. I won't be able to figure it out. I think they switch it out. Anyway. Do you like Live or Let Die, Amy? It's the cleverest Bond song. When you were young. Used to say live and let live, but you're James Bond now, so before anyone can kill you, live and let die. Well, I think that if you listen to all the Beatles music, especially around the Help, like in the film Help, they already were kind of on that. See, they're really good. It was just a natural thing. The Beatles sound was a natural thing, especially the guitars. So that's part of the genius too, is to pick certain guitars. They were genius at picking guitars that had a specific sound. So there's the radio over here. So that sound already Paul was curating. And then by the time he did that song, which I think was in the early 70s, Live and Let Die, I could be wrong, mid 70s maybe, that really was Paul's sound. So it wasn't that big, to me, it wasn't that big of a stretch. It's a great song, but I feel like Paul was always meant to write Live and Let Die. I think it pissed off John maybe, because it was very cutthroat. But James Bond in general, didn't George love James Bond and everything? And they already had that. Revolver was very James Bondish. The guitars and the sound and the sort of that alt. See, I went off on like an autistic thing, a long answer, but I just said yes, yes or no. Do you like Live or Let Die? Yes, I do. I do like it. My point being that that was um, they asked him to write a song for James Bond, but really Paul already was writing stuff like that. So um, yeah, long answer. That's James Bond the movies. I'll watch the movies. I know that some people probably try to cancel them, but they're very clever and a specific era and all. I mean, I think they're funny. They have the funny bits and then the clever, and then the music. There's always a really cool song in every movie. So, and he wrote Spies Like Us, which is kind of like a James Bond type of movie. And see, he's very versatile. So I've only heard a few people say bad things about him. I've never met Paul. I was outside the stadium when he did a warm up, so I got to hear that raw Paul McCartney talking into a microphone about, "Hey, turn up the bass," which still echoes in my head. And then I got to see him in concert, and as you know, my friend and I, we were like, we have to go to the bathroom, so we'd sat through almost the entire concert, and we went to the bathroom real quick. And as we came out, there was, the story, Jamie, fireworks. And we're like, oh my God. It was like, and he was playing the last notes of Live or Let Die. And we're like, we missed it. We missed like the finale of, you know, probably the one reason everybody goes to a concert is that type of song and experience and the fireworks and everything else. So, but it was good. The clever response when you were young, you used to say, live and let live. You just find out so you can kill your first live and let die. And of course, James Bond is the epitomal rising from the ashes, coming back from death, like Tom and Jerry cartoon where Tom gets flattened by a train or something or a car and then just pops up and everything's fine. Well, that's like James Bond. Anything else? Let's see. Anything else about Paul? Paul is, you don't know. He, well, he's a Gemini, obviously, but I always feel like he has more of a Cancer type of feel about him. I think that's in his chart. He obviously was born in Liverpool. He has a brother, Mike. I don't think his brother looks like him at all. It's the weirdest thing. When I see Mike McCartney, I think, how are they related? I don't get it. But none of my business. But yeah, they don't look alike at all. It's weird. It's interesting how John was perceived to be the bad boy when it actually it was Paul who had the most run-ins with the police. Yeah. And okay, speaking of that, one of my favorite moments was in the Get Back in the rooftop concert. Well, you know that Paul says in that movie in Get Back, he says, "Here's what I like. I'd like for us to go to a place we're not supposed to have a concert." Because the director, Michael Lindsay Hogg, was saying, "Happy birthday." Okay, Carolyn says, "Happy birthday." Hey girl, how you doing? Yay, Paul's birthday. He'll be forever young. Forever young. He'll always be our little Paul, our Beatle Paul. Right? The Beatle that everybody wanted to marry. And well, okay, so the rooftop concert. So Paul says to the director of the Let It Be movie, let's not do this Grecian Colosseum thing or on a cruise ship or what have you. Let's do where we go to a place we're not supposed to go, and then the cops show up and they tell us we have to leave. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly how it went. So Paul, and he also designed the Abbey Road cover. If you see the drawings, that wasn't spontaneous, even like down to like what they wore. So Paul had that planned out. But so anyway, Paul, I don't know about any bad stuff from Hamburg. I think John probably did more bad stuff in Hamburg. I don't know. But But I will say this: you're right, Jamie, because Paul's the one that got arrested in Japan, and um, but yeah, the rooftop concert, the cops come up and they've delayed him as long as they can, and the cops go up there to the rooftop, and Mal Evans turns down the amp, right? And John doesn't go turn it up. George does, but Paul starts to taunt the cops with like, "Oh, we're gonna get arrested," and get back," and all that stuff. And he's very in their face about it, like taunting them, like, "Come get us, come get us." So then John's like, "Shut up, Paul! I just got busted for pot," and it was all over the news. So um, yeah, it's funny about that. You can tell that John's like, "Shut up! I don't want to get arrested again." In fact, if you watch Get Back, everybody leaves the rooftop, but John stays behind with Yoko, and she has a bag, and I think it's John's bag. No, wait, is it her bag? Anyway, he has her hold it, and then he whispers something in her ear, and he puts something in her pocket. He waits for the cops to leave. He does this, and I'm like, oh my god, he just put probably pot or something, pills in her jacket. Not promoting drugs, but go watch that scene. That's John does that, and because he had just been busted for hash, which he said was planted. I believe that, although he did have some somewhere else. But yeah, um, Paul again, and I say this in the book that I wrote, "Nothing to Get Hung About." You, John often says about Paul that Gemini, because Geminis are kind of like the naughty. Um, they have two different personalities, and Paul definitely has that. He's, you know, oh, I'm rambling again. Anybody else have any memories of Paul, like their favorite Beatle memory, or was Paul your favorite Beatle? Um, did you ever see his concerts? I just saw the one. I saw one concert. It was great. I don't really like big concerts, but I'm happy that I went to that one, of course. So, another favorite Paul moment. Okay, what are my favorite Paul? While you're talking, while you're writing, um, my favorite Paul moments are that I love the rooftop. I love that. I love how the day before the rooftop concert, they're in Apple Studios or Abbey Road, and Paul is trying to talk his way out of it. He's like, "We're not ready. We're supposed to do all these songs. We had like 21 songs, and we didn't practice enough. We messed around too much. We had all this stuff happen, and I don't think we should do it. We're not ready." And John's like, "Oh, we can do it. We'll just do these 9 songs that we have." And Paul is extremely OCD paranoid about the whole thing. And you think, "Oh, it's not going to happen. They're going to jump out of it before the next day." But when they get there, it's pure business and pure showmanship, and you could see the magic of the Beatles. I mean, before you're just seeing them as 4 guys, okay, 4 guys, a band. And I've been around lots of musicians, and yeah, just 4 guys in a band. But when they got up there and when they would go on stage, it was magic, and they really did have that star quality and the showmanship. You could see it, even like Paul was a showman. The rooftop concert is a great example of how they could get up there and just be what they were, why we love them. You know what I mean? Like, we love to see them as human beings, but those stars, like the rock stars, there, it was great. It's great. It's exciting. And how much they love music and would just emote the music. I love that. So, and Paul is really good at that. Anything else? Let's see. One of my favorite. I think we all love the moment when, who's the guy that the car? What is it? The car karaoke. Who's that guy? And Paul had kind of had a lull in his career. Let me look it up. Paul McCartney car karaoke. And I remember somebody said, "You need to watch that, Amy. It's really good." The Late Late Show. Um, well, anyway, somebody said you should watch it. It might have been my sister, and she's like, "You should watch it. It's really good." So I watched it, and my God, that was so. Yeah, James Corden. That's right. He doesn't do the show anymore. Um, just the way that Paul, no matter what his age is, he'd let his hair start to go gray. It's the first time he kind of came out and showed his gray hair, and he came out and he still has it. He still has that charisma. The thing about Paul is he looks like um, Sylvester Stallone mixed with uh, Elvis, and but it's not just that. Okay, it's his mannerisms. He has everything that you would think that any iconic person, like Mae West or Marilyn Monroe or someone like that. Paul has it. He has like that funny, like, it's like that's savoir. What do you call the savoir faire? The has a flair of himself and his mouth thing that he does. The elevator they kept opening the door and driving. Yeah, was that on the James Corden show? I think it was. But and then when they went to that pub, and they were behind the curtain, and the people in the pub were just hanging out, just Sunday, right? And then they dropped the curtain, and it's friggin' Paul McCartney. That would just kill you. Again, and how they kept everyone else from coming in, I don't know, because word got around. I think my favorite, Jamie says, I think my favorite Paul album is Flaming Pie. I love that album too. After 2 years with that recording to work on the anthology, it seems the Beatle part of Paul's brain awoken, resulting in some amazing Beatles sounding songs. I agree. I remember getting that album or CD. I have it in my car actually. And and here's the thing about that. So that was after, you're right, after the anthology, and before that was the Hope and Deliverance. I don't think that's, what is the name of the album? Not Hope and Deliverance. Off the Ground. Off the Ground. And so when Flaming Pie came out, here's some notable things about that album. His son plays on that. It's the first time his son plays with him on any recorded that we know of, professionally recorded. And Linda wasn't doing well. So when Off the Ground came out, that's when we knew that Linda had cancer and was fighting cancer. And I think she had gotten the all clear. But when Flaming Pie came out, Linda was it had come back. So there was that. I remember buying that album, listening to it and thinking, and I had read the news that she had gotten cancer again, and thinking, oh no, I mean, that's really stressful. And that Paul's stressed out, and they just made this album, and what if she dies? And then she did die. And yeah. So when I hear Flaming Pie, I think of a very, very difficult time in Paul's life right before Linda died, and then she did die. And it was just, it's a beautiful album. Let me look some of those songs. Looking at The World Tonight. The World Tonight's a great song. The song we were singing, I was just thinking of that song today. A lot of great guitar solos on that album. But to me, it's not his best album. I feel like he rushed it. It was kind of in between him going back to his pure sound, which I think Chaos and Creation went back to a Revolver sound, which was pure Paul. Yeah. But it is a great album. It really is. I love it. When James took him to his house that he hadn't been since a kid. Yes. And the thing about that house was his father raised him in that house, and his father, who really taught him a lot about piano and standard music writing. Paul listened to Peggy Lee and all the old standards, jazz and like 1940s. He learned his dad was in a band. So his dad was his mother. He became his mother, but also his like teacher. He really did teach Paul a lot. And also he allowed John to come in, and Paul really wasn't allowed to go into and to John's house with Aunt Mamie. that much. Now Julia did; she let them in, but Paul's father was like an early version of Paul. I always think of that. They even look a lot alike, you know. Um, and isn't his no? Okay, wait. If you watch, give my regards to Broad Street. There's an actor that plays Paul's father in the movie, but it's not really his father because didn't his dad die in the 70s? Like John's father died in the 70s too. So, um, so there's still Paul's house. I think they preserved the John's house. Menlo Avenue is still there, not Kenwood or Kent and Kent. I think Ringo's house in Dingle is there. And George, where did George grow up? I think his house is still preserved. I want to see all of them. That would be Jamie. Have you seen Paul's house? Jamie says one of the most hauntingly beautiful things I've heard is that whenever someone Paul loved died, his dad, Brian Epstein John, he never got to say goodbye, so he spent a year saying goodbye to Linda. You know, there's a video. It's in my head. Like for Flaming Pie, they made a video of sort of like Paul and Linda riding horses and making campfires, and Paul looked sort of not as we see him today. He looked very, probably his most overweight, I would think, and kind of puffy and tired. And you could just see that it had weighed on him. It was a very, very difficult time for Paul. See, I think, am I wrong? When did Linda die? Maybe it was after. Maybe Flaming Pie was after. I think it was right. It was the same era. But anyway, yeah. He really loved Linda. And he'll still post pictures that she took. He still loves her. He really does. He'll always love her. I think he misses her a lot. And I think she probably visits him. No offense to his new wife. I mean, he loves his wife, Nancy Cheval. He loves her very much. But I do think that he dreams of Linda and she comes to him a lot. And Paul thinks of her a lot. And I need to get a battery charger. Hold on. Doesn't that figure? Stupid battery. I hope that it'll let me reach over here and do this. Okay. So I do think that, yeah, Linda visits him and he dreams of her a lot. And he's kept her legacy alive with being a vegan. And he put out her album of her songs, which, I didn't think that Linda was the greatest singer or songwriter. Her voice is beautiful on his work, but I didn't think that her music was, no offense, but I didn't, but her artistry, her work with him, she as a human being was extremely beautiful. She had that natural beauty, in fact, there was a picture the other day. She wasn't wearing any makeup, nothing. And I thought, my God, she was just so beautiful. She had that natural, organic beauty that most people I could never achieve that. So, yeah, that was hard when she died. She was an earth angel. She really was. Now, this morning, I woke up and I started to see the messages about, happy birthday wishes for Paul. And then there was a picture of Paul and it said, happy birthday. And right underneath it was a picture of John doing this up to the picture of happy birthday. So I thought that was interesting. And I guess, I don't know. I just felt like it was John saying, yes, happy birthday. Say happy birthday to Paul. So that's why I'm doing this live today. Linda was dying during the making of Flaming Pie. Okay. As was Maureen Starkey. He wrote the song Little Willow as a tribute to Maureen to comfort Ringo and their kids. I do remember that. Because I remember hearing that song. I love that song. I've actually performed that song live because I love Little Willow so much. It's a really beautiful song. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, Linda's sick. What if Linda died? So, yeah. It's just, You see how life echoes. Life says this might happen or this is going to happen. Get ready, get ready. Um, the poor Paul, that's anyway. I still have one of her vegetarian cookbooks. And also, I remember she had a line of vegetarian frozen meals, and I went out and bought them. They were pretty good. I liked it. Carolyn says, my favorite is when he sent Zach Nilsson a letter when he was taking treatment for cancer. Yeah. And he still does things like that. Let's see, he's really sweet. Paul, people could get mad at him and when you watch Get Back, he's kind of a bitch sometimes. But so is George, and so is John. Um, but yeah, Paul's very sweet about things like that. So let's hope that he stays on this planet for 20 more years, and still writes and all of that. It's made me happy as a music lover. As I know you guys too. I mean, my favorite albums are Paul McCartney albums. So Michelle, I remember the first time, of course, the Beatles had already been out for a long time. Is when I really started to get into the Beatles because I'd had my John Lennon moment, which had been coming for a while. It was like looking back now, I knew it was the echoes of John waking me up because of our past lives and everything. He was starting to try to get me to go, oh yeah, John Lennon. Just like a moment where I would look into his eyes and it finally happened. But with that was the beautiful joy of not just discovering John Lennon and his music and his work as, peace activist and all that, but like the Beatles, like all of them. It was amazing. And so listening to all their music as the Beatles, that was such a beautiful thing. I wish that I could go back, erase it all, and go back and have all of that experience again. But to be honest, every time I do something like watch Hard Day's Night, Help, or listen to any Beatles music, I kind of do that. I make myself erase it and just let myself have a brand new, fresh experience again, like 18-year-old Amy. And because that's, we should always keep that young teenager inside of us. That's what I feel. So I remember the first time I heard the song Michelle, and for some reason I hadn't heard it, in the mix of Madonna dominating the radio and things like that. It was this beautiful moment in my bedroom. I'm, 18, and I hear the song, the crackly sound of the record, and Paul's voice and that guitar, and him singing Michelle with the French accent and words. And I remember thinking, who are these guys? Well, how did they do that? How did they think to write this beautiful French-inspired song and his beautiful voice, and that's really when I fell in love with the Beatles, when I heard the song Michelle, because I thought, okay, we got Love Me Do, we've got all these, Please Please Me, and all the rock, Twist and Shout and everything, Hard Day's Night, but then they just throw out some beautiful song like Michelle, and that the teenage girls in the 60s must have, I mean, my gosh, that's why they were like Beatle fans for life. I'm going to marry Paul. I'm going to marry Paul. When he explained that Let It Be was about his mother, she came to him. Yes, she did. Karen, come here. Do you want your blankie, Karen? Come here. That's a baby. His mother, Mary. And growing up Catholic, as I've said, I remember that song would still be played on the radio, and it was a Saturday, and I was cleaning the wallpaper. And my mother was in the kitchen doing whatever, cleaning the kitchen, and she had the radio on, and Let It Be came on, and I'd heard of the Beatles, and I remember hearing those words of Mother Mary came to me, and thinking, oh, this song is about Mother Mary, Jesus's mother. And in a way, it is a spiritual song. And it was a song for him from his mother to comfort him in the great time of change. And like Brian dying, and then, he lost Jane Asher, but then got together with Linda, the Beatles breaking up, the Vietnam War, and all these things going on. And his mother came to him to guide and comfort him. And it was religious. And he said that people would say, "Oh, it's a religious song," and he's like, "Yeah, if you want it to be, that's what it is." And isn't that what Mother Mary is anyway? She's the mother to all of us. Um, my puppy dog is giving me some looks here. So let's see. We still have some time. Amy, how did John feel about Heather Mills after divorcing Paul? She came to Liverpool and none of the shops would serve her. Pick on one Liverpudlian, pick on all of us. Ditto Mark Chapman, yeah. How did, well, from the other side, instantly I get that from the other side, Spirit sees it differently as it was a lesson for Paul to find out who he was because Paul hadn't quite learned, you're a Beatle and you're get all these, you make all this money and you have these houses and you worked hard, but Paul hadn't learned yet to say no to certain people and that he had to have boundaries. And he also had to have value in himself. Now he's had all these spiritual experiences with meditation and the Maharishi and all of that and LSD, and he's had all these things. But Paul did not know about himself that he still had to be able to say, you can't do that to me. So that's what Heather Mills was. He was searching for another Linda, but at what cost? And the cost was he was giving up his pride, his part of his like his money. That's what I'm seeing is just Heather from this John's perspective. Heather Mills was a soul exercise for Paul to be able to say, that's not good enough for me. I need someone who really loves me and who won't lie to me. I don't know. That's just what I'm seeing. But did John like Heather Mills? No. But as a spirit, he doesn't hate her or anything. He just, obviously, he felt bad for Paul. But Paul had to learn that lesson. He'd always had girls throwing themselves at him, women, girls, but he still had to have a value in himself and be alone. Paul had to be alone for a while. That's what it was too. He had to face himself and be alone. And he did. That's why I think when Chaos and Creation came out, Paul, I don't know if he was with his new wife, Nancy, yet, but to me, it was a time when Paul was just Paul and he was alone. He wasn't with Linda. He wasn't with the Beatles. It was just Paul. And you could hear that in it. It's a really beautiful album. So that's how John sees Heather Mills. Heather was a lesson for Paul McCartney, his buddy. And they are buddies. They're brothers. John does come to his dreams. And John does write through him and with him. He's written many songs with John from the other side. So Paul's very spiritual. Like he's psychic. They all were. So let me open this door for my puppy dog. And you're gonna need some food, aren't you, buddy? You want to go out there? Go out. I need to make his dinner. It's always time to make puppy dog dinner, isn't it? You want your blankie? Come here. Get your blankie, sweet. Did you know that Paul has a dog that looks just like Karen? I think he got him last year. I thought that was kind of interesting because, I got Karen last year and then Paul got his dog they look very similar. He's like, Mom, I want you to go cook me something and take me outside. Oh, well, John knows that. Tell John I'd love to be his buddy. He knows that. You are. Of course you are. Okay, here's how John sees it. Anyone who calls out to him and also especially someone who loves music and rock and anyone who's for peace and working toward that and a deeper understanding of oneself, John's all for that. So you're instantly his buddy. And he was like that in life too. He would talk to anybody, And so he knows, Jamie, he knows you are his buddy. So. All right, just a few more minutes. Anything else? Any of your favorite memories of? Uh, doesn't have to be about Paul, but that was the whole thing. Of course, now in Liverpool, it's going to be evening already. So what is it? What, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11? See, is it almost midnight? Paul didn't have as many hang-ups as John. Like John, there's this, book of letters where John would get pissed and write people. He could write love, beautiful letters, or the most vitriol in the universe, and then afterwards say, "Oh, I didn't really mean all that," because John had a lot of hang-ups. He had a lot of reactionary behavior uh, to protect himself, and Paul obviously is much more like, "Yeah, I'll work with you," and then if it doesn't work out, then whatever. It didn't work out. So what's that thing on my head? um, they were John and Paul were musically matched, but their voices weren't the same. It's funny, they both had a similar tone, so they could sing together like they were family members. Um, but they had their own unique sound. Like Paul was much more mellow, had a deeper sound, and John's was much more up here in the nasal, um, nasally, scratchy. But when they sang together, it really was like the Everly Brothers. It was a really beautiful combination of their voice. It's almost like a healing combination when you hear them together. Yes, they were celebrations in Liverpool for Paul today. Oh, good. A bakery made him a giant vegan birthday cake. Oh, that's good. Wonderful. I don't think he gets back to Liverpool much anymore, um, but I'm sure he appreciates that very much. So that's nice. He has, okay, it may be going on right now, in June, it probably is, in New Jersey, I think. Or is it just New York? It could be just me, New York. His photos from that book he did are in a gallery. So that's really cool. So I think he's in New York right now, currently. And see, Paul sailed. He had his own yacht, which sounds like rich man syndrome, but he honestly just loved to be on the water. See, that's a Liverpool thing, right? To want to be on the water. He really loves his kids. I'm just listing all, not because I want to talk about Paul all day, but it's because it's about Paul. And, you know, he's got the Nepo babies, right? That his two daughters are, and he has three daughters. His stepdaughter would be Heather. I don't think he got to know her. Okay, he loves Heather, his daughter with Linda's daughter when he married her. But obviously Heather had her own journey, and then his two daughters with Linda, much more natural relationship, I would say. I don't know. Uh, oh gosh. And then his son, let me comment on that. And then Paul's son, James, who's, it's funny, James looks like his dad, but doesn't look like his dad. He's got his talent of music, but then he doesn't. It's the weirdest thing. I do think that Linda's death affected James Mccartney really deeply, and Paul doesn't talk about it. He doesn't, and I won't talk about it either. I'll just leave it there. Carolyn says, I had a surprise last night. John came to me to tell me Harry can't come for a while because he has things to take care of, but he will be back soon. See, that makes sense, Carolyn, because remember, did I say it? I was talking about Harry, and I kept seeing that image of like, who's the Spectre guy? Not Ronnie. Is it Ronnie Spector? Who Harry's not like him, but when Ronnie Spector died, isn't that his name? Phil Spector. Sorry, Phil Spector. When he died, I saw Phil Spector with a suitcase hitchhiking on a highway on the other side, and I said, "Are you going to talk to him, John?" And John's like, "No, he's not available to talk. He's on his own journey." And I kind of saw something similar with Harry, that he has a journey to go on. But you know what? John's done that with me too, where I didn't feel him around me. And yeah, I get really depressed when it happens. Let me tell you, I get really, but then I have to accept it. Here's the thing, on the other side, they do have to go through journeys and learn, and they get stronger and they bring it back to us. And in the same light, we do that here on earth. We have lessons, revelations, and then we show them because they're connected to us, and then they grow on the other side with what we show them. So it's vice versa. So when Harry goes on this journey, he still has something, probably still some things with addiction and drinking. um, he comes back. He doesn't do it to leave you. There's still some things in his soul that are fractured, and he has to fix that. And then he comes back better, and it helps you out. Because maybe there's some things in your soul, like with the depression, which I have, sadness and loss, that Harry will help you with when he comes back. So just know that you're always connected, and it's hard, but just keep. What you can do is write a letter to him every day, either by on paper or in an online, like a computer journal, like Word Perfect or something, and write to him and know that you're still connected. He can still hear you, but he's on a journey. He's literally taking a trip to heal himself, and then you get healed too. So try not to be sad, but I know it's hard. I know it is. It's really hard. It's not, when I hear people say that souls on the other side, oh, it's all perfect and they're in this place of bliss, I'm like, I don't think so. Because I've never gotten that from John. John's always learning, and he's been through a lot on the other side, and he visits here a lot. So it's not perfect on the other side, not at all. It's just, they just don't have to deal with things like money, and but they still have soul lessons. Yeah. No, you didn't know that. He can take all the time he needs to heal. I will write to him. Thank you. Yes, you're welcome. And I just went through it with John, where John was gone for a while, and it is upsetting. So yeah, write to him, listen to his music, or I don't know. You said you don't really listen to his music, which is understandable. It's like me listening to Paul a lot, but not John, because it kind of hurts to listen to John. It's very heavy for me. So yeah, write to him, and you're still connected. He can still hear you. It's just that his focus is on healing. He's on a literal trip, on a literal highway on the other side, and he will be back. He'll be back. So he'll bring you a souvenir. That's what he says. All right, my friends, this was fun. Uh, as always, I almost feel like I should call myself the autistic mystic, because I know when I come on here and I just spout off. I grew up in a library, and I worked at a library, and I surround myself with books. So I'm like a walking library. So when people ask me things, I never say yes or no. It's the long answer, because I have all this info in my brain. So I feel bad. Like, I know other viewers might come on here and go, whoa, info dump. It is like an autistic info dump when I come on here. So I appreciate you guys bearing with me when I spew knowledge. By the way, so I wrote this blog. I might put the link on my community page, but I wrote a blog about the movie Bratz, there's a documentary called Bratz, with the Brat Pack from the 80s, with all the John Hughes movies, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I think John Hughes also did Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which is one of my favorite movies. I actually saw that movie with my mother in a real movie theater. And Pretty in Pink and all those, the Brat Pack, Demi Moore, St. Elmo's Fire, Rob Lowe, all that stuff. So everybody was like, oh, this documentary sucks. It sucks. Oh, thank you, Carolyn. I love you too. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, but we go through our things. I have a very, oh yeah, with my spewing. Yeah, I do feel bad though. I wish that I wouldn't info dump so much, but that's who I am. And thank you for saying that. I'm glad. I really am like a walking computer. You know what's funny? And I'll go back to my thing. You know, before we had computers, I look back now and I'm like, how did I get all this stuff? How did I know? How did I? Because I knew everything even back then before computers, and I didn't have a set of encyclopedias around because those were too expensive. So, but I did have a library, and I would go to the bookstores. I would go to the mall, and I would get whatever, like weekly or maybe whenever my paycheck would come in, and I would get a book about the Beatles or a book about rock or whatever. There were ways, newspapers, magazines, the library. We video cassettes, videos. There before the internet, there were ways to get information, and my God, I really did. I mean, I've told my daughter because my daughter is like the Google queen of the universe, and it's so easy now. He's like, well, when did Einstein do this? And you just go to Google and you look it up. Well, back in the old days, you had to go find a friggin' book or go get in your car and go to the library and ask the reference librarian or something like that. So that's I'm the product of all of that. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you for saying that. And I love you guys. I love that you guys are here with me and you're my friends. So that makes me happy. I'm glad that we're all together as kindred spirits. Um, anyway, there's on Hulu, if you have Hulu, there's the documentary about the Brat Pack. Andrew McCarthy, I had a crush on him when I was a teenager. And I wrote a blog about how, um, okay, so yeah, they were brats. But that part of the being a teenager in the 80s, that was a big part of being a teenager in the 80s. Going to see Pretty in Pink at the mall movie theater. I remember standing in line and getting a ticket to see Pretty in Pink. I remember the opening sequence and what it felt like. She had red hair, and as a redhead, I was like, wow, she has red hair, and she's the main character. But unlike me, she had it was like the Mary Sue thing, like that she had the rich guy after her, like two rich guys after her, and then Ducky, the grungy alt guy, was after her. And so anyway, so I wrote a blog about that, and I will post that for you guys to read. And I love you and all. I don't know. Will I do a live tomorrow? I don't know. We'll see. I don't think I work tomorrow. So if I don't work tomorrow, I'll come back and I'll do a live. We'll do some political stuff and just talk. And Jerry Lee Lewis, he also looked, okay, Andrew McCarthy looked like Jerry Lee Lewis more. But you know what? He also kind of had the Andy Kaufman thing. And you know how I've always had, like, not a crush on Andy Kaufman, but like I genuinely love Andy Kaufman. He taught me a lot about meditation and spirit, and this is after John, but he was part of my spiritual journey. But yeah, Andrew McCarthy has those eyes. Isn't that interesting? So yeah, I had a big crush on him. But I've had crushes on as a teenager. Didn't we all have a crush on different people? And he was just one of them. So I watched it. Yeah, I watched this documentary. I thought it was good. The 80s weren't a great introspective time of history, but they were. Yeah. It's the movies I liked. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, I think, is a great movie. I love John Candy in that movie is amazing. He's a genius. And what else he did? Say Anything, I think. So John Hughes was a very interesting filmmaker. And so despite the Brat Pack and whatever anybody thinks of those actors, I thought the movies, looking back now, I thought the movies left a great impact and helped me as a teenager on my development toward my spiritual self and, looking at life in a certain way. And he would sort of sprinkle in stuff like soul music, like Otis Redding and things like that. And so John Hughes, and I kind of have chills as I say that, should be, I hope that people go watch his movies again because they were really good movies. So lots of human stories like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. At the end of the movie, Steve Martin has a deep understanding of John Candy and has changed. Like he's changed as a human being. I really, really love that movie. And the other thing I was going to say, um, The Outsiders was one of my favorite books, and the movie's a great movie. So that's part of the Brat Pack. And also, and I'm going to have to get off soon, but Andrew McCarthy and Matt Dillon filmed a movie just down the road from where I lived when I was a teenager, and they filmed it. It was a movie called Kansas. Not the greatest movie in the world. I felt like the director did not film those scenes very well. It was so weird. The way he filmed it was weird. But they did a good job in acting. I thought they did their best. But I remember my mother said, I was a teenager, I had a babysitting job. And my mother said to me, Amy, they're looking for extras for this movie called Kansas. Because I don't think I had a car then. So to go try out to be an extra in this movie with Andrew McCarthy, my teenage crush, I had to have my mother drive me there. And I was like, oh, I don't want my mother to. That looks so stupid to have my mother drive me. Um, so I don't think I did it. I didn't do it. The other thing was, and this was before my time really, but they talked about the movie, and Jamie, you'll know this movie, I think, The Day After Tomorrow, which was about nuclear bombs. And they filmed it in Lawrence, Kansas, which was another town just down the road from me. And when I was in high school, they were still talking about that movie. And they did a huge segment in school on it and made us think about what it would be like if the nuclear bomb dropped in my town, because it was literally where I lived. And the whole theory was that in the cornfields where I lived, there were nuclear missiles hidden in the cornfields. It was crazy. That was very scary. That movie, when I think about it, I like freak out a little bit because they really drilled into us that there was going to be a Cold War and we were all going to die. And what would you do if a nuclear bomb hit? What would you do? And I'm like 13 going, oh my God, I don't want to think about nuclear bombs. And my mother had a stash of canned foods in the basement. So it's scary. But history, very interesting historical uh, time. And right down the road for me, that's what hits home. It was right down the road for me. All right. I'm going to end this. Love you guys. Take care. I'll try to be back on tomorrow. So bye. Much love. And happy birthday to Paul McCartney. Thank you.